All right. Well, we are here for week 2 of learning to code, making a website together, whatever this is. And so Matt and Bergan are putting together a little website. Bergan is the photographer for his scout troop. Is that right, Berg?
Yep.
So as part of that, he's going to put together a little website that highlights a bunch of photos from their scout activities. And I'm just trying to help out to get them started and get them moving down the road with that project. So without any further ado, last week we basically went over just the very top level stuff about HTML, kind of like what an HTML tag is, how HTML tags start and end, and just the basics of a body tag and a title tag. And so this week we're going to add images. So we have a little Dropbox where we're sharing things, and then we'll basically just try to get something really basic working as far as showing an image on that page. So let me grab all the windows I need real quick here. So our Dropbox, I will go ahead and just share my screen so we can kind of be seeing this together. All right. Switch to screen sharing. All right. Whoa. Videos inside videos. All right. So this is kind of the HTML page that we put together last time. Oh, actually, this is one that Bergan put together. Is that right?
Yeah.
So, so we can take this and say view frame source, and we can see here the HTML that Bergan wrote in order to get that working. And so the main things here are kind of starts with HTML and a body, and then has a little bit of content, and ends. It closes out the body tag and then closes out the HTML tag. So, so Bergan added a little image here, and this is the first time I actually looked at that image. That's awesome. So we're going to try to add that image to the web page, and kind of go over the basics of how images work in HTML. So, so I have that Dropbox folder synced down here to my computer, so that I can just open the and basically the way that we're going to add an image.
Hey, Mikey.
Yeah.
Can you enlarge that screen at all?
Oh yeah, hang on.
There you go.
Is that better?
Yeah, and return it down there. There's a Google watermark up in the upper left-hand corner. It takes about your first 2 lines.
Okay, I'll drop it down here just a little bit.
Yeah.
Is that good?
Perfect.
Yep.
All right. So what I'm thinking here is for our next version of this site, how we would kind of like it to look, is that we should basically visually what we expect to see is kind of like this little opening title, and then kind of your little tagline, and then I just wanted to put that image right here below it. So to try to get that to work, what we're basically going to do is just use another type of a tag. So in the same way that this H1 tag is supposed to represent a header, and a P tag represents a paragraph, there's an IMG tag, and that represents I want to put an image on this page. Now, when you're talking about text, you can just put the text that you want to show up in that header just right here in line. But describing an image to a computer is a lot more complicated. There is so like one way you could specify an image to a computer is you could just think of every dot of that image as hang on, I'll jump back to video chat real quick. So you could think about an image as just going to be like the square, and you could basically tell the computer in a file, you could basically say there's the first dot on the top left, and it's this color, and then there's this dot, and it's this color, and there's this dot, and there's this color. And that was actually how they specified images in the very first format of images on computers. But that format means that if the way you describe a color takes up a certain amount of space on your hard drive, that would take about 3 bytes of space is kind of the way that they used to do images. And so if you think about an image that's about 1,000 pixels wide, 1,000 pixels tall, that's a million spots, and then each one of those dots would take 3 bytes of information to specify the color that you wanted to have in that dot. And so that would be like 3 megabytes just for one small image. And so it was a very inefficient way to represent an image. And so over the years, they came up with things like JPEG and PNG and GIF and other image formats, and they all basically follow that same idea of kind of explaining to the computer, there's this dot, then this dot, then this dot, but they have other ways of explaining. So if you have a big chunk of the dots, like in this image of me right here, right, like around my face, I don't have all the different possible colors. I only have a small number of all possible colors in this image right now. And so what it'll do is say, oh, instead of telling you exactly what color, I'll just tell you like a palette of colors up front, and then for every dot, I'll just tell you which one of those colors from the palette I was using. And so now each one of the dots takes a lot less space to specify. And they do other things like that to try to still represent what the image should look like without having to be like very specific about each specific dot. So so jump back into code here for a second now. And the way we're going to make this work is we don't want to specify all those bytes and bits right here inside this image tag, right? If we did, we'd have to have like 10001, all this stuff right here, and no one would understand what that means, and it would take a lot of space. If you can imagine 3 million of these characters, like it'd just take up your whole page, and it'd be really hard to understand what's happening. So instead what you do is you say, I'm going to store the bytes of that image somewhere else, the thing that represents all the dots, and I'll just tell you where to find that. So, so what you can say is, let's see, your image was called image_1329.jpg. 1329.jpg. And so if we just put that much onto your image, then we should be able to jump back over and see that your website hopefully just updated. Hopefully this Dropbox thingamajigger is fast. And frame source, did it update? Did not update yet. Let's try to, oh, there it goes, now it has it. So let's see if we can close this and open it back up. Oh, and you can see it has, like it tried to load a little image thing there. Here, I'll blow this up, make it a little bit bigger. So you can see it tried to put a little box here, but it wasn't sure how to fill it in quite right. So let's see, maybe I just got the name of the image wrong. Image_1329.jpg. And that is the way I set it. So I'm guessing then that it probably just doesn't find things in the same folder quite the way that I expected. So instead what we're going to do is we're going to, let's see, open this, and then I'm going to say the original. And now I can take this URL right here, so that's like a more complete address of where this picture lives on the internet. And I'm just going to copy and paste that into the HTML, save it, and then we'll see if this guy updates. Yep, now he has that full URL. So basically, previously we had just specified this much of the address,
Yeah.
and now we're saying, oh, it couldn't quite find it the way we expected, so instead we're going to specify the full address. So it's starting all the way back here from like the beginnings of the internet, and it's going all the way back through where you have that image on Dropbox.
Mm-hmm.
And now, if we close this guy,
Normally, Mikey, though, if we have this folder on our computer or server wherever, and we just point that, go to this folder and grab this image, it usually works, right?
exactly, yeah. And so when we get this project to the point where we have it on our own server that we can make the rules for, we can make it so that it can really easily find that image just by specifying the name of the image and maybe a folder name, but not having to specify where it lives on the internet. So, but we can see we're already making progress, right? Like it did find that image and it has pulled it in, and so what happens now is, jump back real quick. So we basically just gave it that one little image tag, and then we said, here's where that image lives. And you can give it, you're basically trying to explain where it lives in the simplest way possible. So we started by just giving it a file name, and we kind of said, just assume it lives in the same place that you do, but it just has this other file name. And so if you opened up with just that file name on your computer in your own browser, it would work just fine. But when we put it on Dropbox, Dropbox doesn't really quite understand folders the same way that your computer does, so it couldn't find it in that same place. And so instead we had to give it a more full address so it could go find that right thing. But once we had given it an address that it understood, it was able just to go and make that happen. And so it's actually, this is where when you're writing HTML, you are trying to understand what does your web browser understand. And so a lot of what you're going to do when you're writing code, when we get to like the JavaScript parts, it's the same question. It's how much does my computer understand? And so that I can write just the instructions that it will understand to accomplish the thing that I want to accomplish. That's kind of the heart and soul of programming.
Okay.
So then one other thing that you should probably know, let's assume now, let's see, I'll just share my screen again. So let's assume now that you wanted to have more than one picture on this page, and you maybe didn't want your picture to be 50 times as big as your header. And even like right now it's so wide that it's getting kind of cut off over here, right?
Yeah.
And so we would like to make that a little bit simpler. So I'm going to actually just open this up so that I'm opening it from my own computer instead of from Dropbox. That way I can use the simpler names.
You can rename that picture too if you want.
Okay. So we'll jump over here, and I'm just going to change it back to this other name. So now this idea right here, when we make a tag, and instead of putting some information inside the tag, we put it in this thing called an attribute. So we've said, hey, we want to put an image on the page, and the source attribute of that image is this file name. And there's other attributes that you can give to an image too. So you can say, for instance, width equals, let's say 400, and height equals. And so we're basically now telling our browser, go find the source of this image in this file, but I don't really care how big the original file is. I want you to show it on the page as if it were 400 pixels high and 400 pixels wide. Or I purpose those, but.
So it knows when you say width and height that you're referencing pixels? You don't have to... Okay.
Yeah, so obviously, like you're saying, there's lots of other ways to specify height and width besides just the number of pixels, but this is kind of the default way that your browser will try to do it. So now, if we open this back up, we can see it kind of stretched the image because it's making, like it's obeying our commands, right? We have told it, it's 400 by 400. I don't care what the original image is, just make it 400 by 400. So in order to make that work, it just kind of stretched the image a little bit so that it looks like a square, even though the original is more rectangular than square. And then we could also say something like, let's assume that we have like 3 or 4 pictures. We could start to put 4 of them on here. And now we'll get 4 of them on our web page. And so
now, Mike, if you wanted those to go vertically instead of horizontally, how would you change that?
So that's a good question. Let's probably easiest to explain that just by jumping in and making the change. So one of the things that takes a little bit of getting used to in HTML is this idea of like, how is my browser going to try to display this information? Because I've just kind of described, if you look at this document we have so far, we haven't really said anything about where things should be. We've just said there should be this header, then there should be this paragraph, then there should be these images. And we kind of assume as humans and as people from America that if we specify things in top-down order, we want this one first. And we usually put things that are first at the top. But like in other languages, like Oriental languages, sometimes they start by writing at the right-hand side and they write towards the left, right?
Right.
And so, so we haven't really specified where things should go. So one easy way is that you can just say, oh, I know that there's a general rule in HTML. The default is that every header tag, H tag, they always take up their own line. So they won't share any horizontal space with other things. They'll make sure that they have their own horizontal area. And paragraphs have that same attribute. And so, so headers and paragraphs kind of behave that same way. Images are what's considered a block element. And so there's some tags that instead of behaving like I'll try to take up my own horizontal space on the page, they'll just say people can sit right next to me on the page, and I'm fine with that. And you can change that behavior by saying, let's put a break. So a break just means before, like, go ahead and render this thing, and then before you render anything else, break down to the next horizontal space. So if we put little breaks between 2 of these, but not between these last 2, then we're guessing that the browser will render this one on top of this one, but then these 2 will be side by side. Let's see if we got that right. So it looks like we got it pretty much right on. That it rendered this one, but then broke down to the next horizontal area, and then it rendered that one, and then it broke down to the next horizontal area, and then it rendered these 2 side by side.
Cool.
So now I think the next question, Berg, this is up to you.
What the?
Whoa!
Oh, awesome.
No, the internet.
What are you doing?
Yeah, cool.
That was in. So, so
You got
Berg,
that recorded.
Yeah, my next question for you is, what do you want your website to look like, right? And we have a lot of different tools that we can pick from to try to explain to the browser, okay, here's these images, I want you to make them look like this. But we have so many tools that it's probably more helpful to start by saying, how do you want it to look and how do you want it to work? And then we can start to pick the tools that will make that happen.
What are you thinking?
Well, I mean, I want a homepage, and I want like.
Talk to Mike.
Well, I want like a homepage, and then I want like, since this is also like young men's, I want like a deacon's quorum, priest, and then elders and teachers, and we could have like different sections where they can go on and see what they're doing that week, and calendars and stuff like that.
Okay. So would you like those, like the links to the other pages? So the link that goes to the deacons page, should it just be a little piece of text that says deacons, or would you like it to be like an image, like maybe one of the deacons images, and then it can say deacons underneath that image, and clicking on that image will take you to the deacons page? What do you think about those options?
I think we could just go with like the picture, and we could have like our Deacon's Quorum presidency. We get a picture of them.
Okay, that's cool. I'm done with that. So And then what do you think, like when you, so the homepage, if the homepage now links to each of these different things, so it'll have like a link to the different organizations, then what should be the name of that homepage? What do you think, like, what's the first thing that someone should see when they land on that homepage?
Maybe like our troop number and then our ward and then maybe a picture of our church right there.
Church or troop?
Cool.
Troop or yeah, troop.
Troop.
Yeah, either one of those. I mean, I think you could use the building where you guys meet as a troop, or just a picture of the troop themselves. And you know, maybe later on, so we can't do this initially, but later on we could maybe do something like every time you upload some new pictures to the website, we could kind of pick one of the most recent pictures and use that as the main image on the homepage. And so it would like be different each time someone went to it, to be kind of whatever's happening right now with your troop.
Yeah.
So let's think about how we could get that to work. Well, we're actually now, I'm looking the time, it's almost 9:30.
Mikey, let's do this. Bergan's got a lot of homework, photography homework, right? So he'll need to take pictures of the presidency for each of those, you know, the troops or the teachers' quorum or whatever. And then he'll need to get a picture of the troop, which I think he could do based off of scout camp from last year. We could probably get a couple pictures. And then at least I know he could do that homework. What other kind of homework could we do until next week? And then, you know, we got to start working on not banners, but you know, we're going to box it in, and here's your picture, and here's your...
Right. So I think maybe a good way to start working on that would be just start by drawing on a piece of paper an example of how you want the website to look. And you can just, if you like draw a box and just label which picture that box should be, that's fine. But just so it gives me an idea of which things do you want to be in the middle of the page, like centered on the page, versus which things should be on the left-hand side or the right-hand side. And do you want the, you know, the deacons and the teachers and the priests to be like lined up horizontally, or should they be a vertical list, and all those kinds of things? The best way to probably answer most of those questions is just to say, let's start getting the pictures that you know you're going to want, and then let's just start with a hand-drawn picture of how you think that homepage should look, and that will be our first kind of, or our next challenge will be to say, okay, how do we take that sketch and figure out how we can write some HTML that looks generally like that. If you get bored during the next week and you have gotten done with all those things, send me an email and I can send you a link to some tutorials about how you can use a thing called Flexbox. So Flexbox is one way to explain to your browser how you want things to line up and whether or not you want some things to line up vertically or whether you want them to be horizontally, and then do you want them, like, if the screen gets too small, should the screen just stop showing the things over here, or should they fall down on the next line? And you can kind of specify all of that to your browser and then just put the things in there and it'll follow the rules that you set up. So we'll end up getting to that next week, but if you get bored this week, just send me an email and I'll help you get started on that.
Dude, where was that 6 years ago when we started project managing for you?
So Flexbox actually has only been a standard for like a year.
Yeah.
So it exists in almost all the major browsers at this point.
Cool.
But yeah, I wish that was around 6 years ago when you and I were building stuff together, because that's actually really, really useful. But people only realized it was useful because we built lots of web pages in an old way that was harder to do, and then they were like, "Now we should just have a way to save all the rules, and then the whole web page will just follow those rules." So
yeah, send me that. You just go ahead and send that to me.
okay,
I'd love to see that.
yeah, I'll send you a link to it then, Matt.
Cool. Okay, sounds good. I think we've got some good homework. Mikey will get things, get images, and I'll have him scope that out, sketch it out for us.
Okay, and your last homework is that whatever images you get of like your Deacon's Quorum presidency and stuff like that, go into that HTML file that you already have in the Dropbox, and I've saved my changes to it so you can see an example of using an image tag, and just copy that to use the different images that you want to have be on that page. That way we'll have something to start with, and we can just try moving them around to see if we like the way the page looks.
Okay, I'm just going to note that what our homework is, and we're good.
All right. Well, have a good night, guys. It's good seeing you.
Thanks, Mikey. You too, bud.
Okay, we'll see you later, Bergan.
See ya.
Bye.
Ciao.
Ciao.